Chapter 6. On Land, in the Air and All at Sea, January to March 1941. As the old year of 1940 drew to a close, on the eve of 1941, the air raid siren sounded once more across the British Isles. The skies thundered with the roar of Adolf Hitler's Luftwaffe planes. Flying in droves towards London, they were to launch their most savage attack of the aerial war to date, as they continued with the Nazi campaign to crush and shatter British morale. While bombs rained relentlessly onto streets and buildings, soon the dark alleyways and crooked passageways of London were illuminated by a fire of vast proportions. Firefighters battled through the dense smoke-filled air, making desperate attempts to quell the blaze as the city was engulfed in flames. Meanwhile, far below in shelters and in the underground stations, civilians cowered in fear, hoping and praying to survive yet another night of the Blitz. Since the summer of 1940, the people of Britain had suffered months of terrifying air attacks, and while the death toll rose, it was tragically clear that more civilians than soldiers were falling victim to the ravages of war. By New Year's Day 1941, as the dust settled and friends and families began to pick their way through the rubble, it's hardly surprising that the British felt more alone than ever in the fight against the Axis. The year before, France had fallen to Nazi Germany, and much of Europe was now occupied by Hitler's henchmen, and while Mussolini's troops continued to fight the British and Commonwealth soldiers across the arid African deserts, the planes and U-boats of the Nazis reigned supreme over the Mediterranean and the Atlantic Ocean. Nevertheless, by 1941, the cracks would begin to show in the alliances that Adolf Hitler had forged, and while the bonds between those fighting for the Allies grew ever stronger, distrust would breed mistrust between those fighting alongside Nazi Germany. The Soviet Union was becoming ever more powerful, building up its armies and their military machine, while the balance of power between Hitler and the Russian leader Joseph Stalin began to shift. Consequently, an unexpected turn of events would have a dramatic impact on the outcome of the Second World War. As the story of the conflict continues, On Land, in the Air and All at Sea will follow the action as it unfolds in the prelude to Germany's invasion of the Soviet Union, while across the Atlantic, President Roosevelt finally rallies support for the Allied cause, giving Britain a fighting chance to make an impact on the Nazi onslaught. By January 1941, most of continental Europe was occupied by the Axis. France had fallen to Germany in June 1940, despite all attempts to fight off the Nazi advance, with Holland, Belgium and Luxembourg also absorbed into Hitler's Third Reich. To the north, Denmark and Norway had been invaded in April 1940, while Finland had surrendered to the Soviet Union just 1 month earlier. Meanwhile, in Eastern Europe, Poland, the country that Britain and France had declared war against Germany in order to defend, had been neatly carved up between Stalin and Hitler, and its inhabitants were now being subjected to the horrors of Nazi occupation. The only country unoccupied and still battling against the Axis was Great Britain, and fighting alongside the British troops were forces from all around the Commonwealth. From Australia and India to Canada, soldiers, minesweepers, pilots and sailors arrived to do their bit to help with the fight against the Nazis and their allies. People had also flooded into Britain from countries occupied by Hitler's Axis of evil. Polish pilots had played a vital part in helping with the fight against the Luftwaffe in the Battle of Britain in the summer of 1940, and Polish cryptographers had been providing crucial information to those working to break the Enigma codes at Bletchley Park. Further afield, those still living in occupied countries were forming resistance groups, sabotaging Nazi communications and gathering followers to continue fighting in small pockets around Europe. But even with support being mustered around the globe to fight Hitler and his allies, the British Prime Minister was wary that vital supplies and resources were running low. The Battle of Britain had taken its toll, with many planes lost in the fighting, and many air bases and factories had been damaged by the Nazi attacks. There had also been significant losses of men and precious equipment in the
Sample complete. Ready to continue?